Hello and welcome to the OnStage Colorado podcast. I'm Alex Miller, and with me here again on a very chilly Saturday morning is arts reporter Toni Tresca. Hey Toni, how's it going?
Good morning, Alex. It's going pretty good. I'm glad to not be out in the cold.
Oh yeah, I was just out there. You know, my dog insists on being walked first thing, so I think it was about 11 degrees out and pretty frosty this morning. But wasn't too bad. The sun's coming out. I'm sure it'll probably take care of a lot of this snow pretty soon. But yeah, pretty chilly. Mm-hmm. So we're recording on February 17th. You and I just saw each other last night. We were out at the premiere, or I don't know if it was actually opening night of...
It was the world premiere for Rubicon.
Okay, yeah, Rubicon at the Denver Center. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. And we went clubbing afterwards. We were just talking about going to Dazzle, which is great. It's this, right next to the Denver Center now. That's this jazz club is kind of reopened. I guess a few months ago or whatever. But
it was in August of 2023 when it officially moved. This is its third location, now officially a part of the Denver Performing Arts Complex. And it's a really swanky club. If you've not checked out Dazzle since the renovation, you should definitely go. It looks quite different even from its previous location.
Yeah, it's a great place to go have a drink and maybe listen to some music after a show. And it's an interesting place. It's kind of rectangular, so like the stage area is like when you go into the right, and then there's kind of a bar area, and then another seating area that's kind of away from the action, which is fine too if you want to talk. So anyway, there's Dazzle. So as usual, we're going to review some of the latest shows that we've seen and talk about some of the reviews that are up on the OnStage Colorado website. And we'll take a look at what's coming up all around the state on stage. So also later in the podcast, I know I've been teasing this for a few weeks now, but we had a couple of other things going on and we took a week off, but we have an interview I did with Josh Blanchard, who's the director of Colorado Creative Industries. And so he'll talk about this sort of entertainment or, arts-centered arm of the state government, how it works around, with arts organizations around Colorado. And, Toni, it relates to some of the stuff that we've touched on in several podcasts in the last few months about funding for the arts and, theater in particular and how things are doing out there from a financial and audience perspective. So that'll be coming up a little bit later. Josh is a great guy and has got a lot of thoughtful thoughts about these topics. So I know we were kicking around topic ideas and we landed on dinner theater, and it seemed a little fitting just because, we just saw the end of BDT Stage, or the Boulder Dinner Theater, after many years in that location. They finally closed their doors at the end of December. And we were just thinking about like dinner theaters in general and like what it takes to, why they're still popular. They're sometimes joked about, as, in some of the same ways that community theater is sometimes. Of course, I reject both of those characterizations. Most people see theater in those kinds of venues, and there's an awful lot of great talent on stage in them. There's also occasional crap, but in Colorado we're pretty fortunate that we've got a pretty robust theater scene with even some of the smaller theaters, and sometimes especially some of the small theaters are really killing it. So but anyway, I wanted you to kick this up because you'd recently written about this. So tell us a little bit about the stories that you've done recently about dinner theater.
Yeah, I've kind of been tracking this kind of evolution, or I guess honestly kind of winding down of like the dinner theater era, because like dinner theaters in Colorado were huge in like the 70s and the 80s. There were like dinner theaters out the wazoo, like Crystal Palace in Aspen, Country Dinner Playhouse in Greenwood Village, Wayside Inn in Berthoud. It's just they were all over, in addition to like the mainstays like BDT Stage, which, as you mentioned, just closed its doors after 47 years in that space over in Boulder in January with their final production of Fiddler on the Roof. And it's funny that you mentioned the perception of dinner theater and kind of playing a role, because when I was interviewing Michael Durham, who was over at BDT, the former executive producer and artistic director over there for a time, he mentioned that one of the things they constantly had to push back against was this perception that the food was like really low grade and the performances were cheap, because that's right. Like when you hear dinner theater, he was like, a lot of people just in their mind, they fill in kind of
rubber
cheap.
Chicken.
Exactly. And anybody who has been to, or who had the pleasure of going to BDT Stage or has been up to Johnstown at Candlelight dinner Playhouse up there, knows that is not necessarily always the case with dinner theaters. Colorado has done a pretty remarkable job in terms of its quality and stepping stuff up, but Unfortunately, it's a really competitive business. It's hard to make them profitable, and so as I was talking with the folks over at BDT, they were just pretty real about it. They were like, because they're a for-profit theater, taxes are really high. There's only a certain amount of seats that they have in the theater, 275, so they just couldn't financially make that work anymore. And dinner theaters really are kind of an enigma in time because they're kind of the two toughest businesses models to fund, theaters and food, and you're trying to put them all under the same house, usually with a rent or a mortgage that you're kind of having to be paying towards. So there's a lot of compounding factors.
If you look at A Tale of Two Dinner Theaters, you've got Boulder Dinner Theater, which is sitting on Boulder real estate, which is some of the most expensive real estate not just in Colorado, but in the country. And paying taxes on that in addition to everything else. And then Candlelight, which is a much newer, I think they only started like 10 years ago. I think I did a story about them maybe for their 5th anniversary a while back for the Denver Post. And I spoke to those guys up there. It was really interesting the way they approached it. They were not starry-eyed theater people. They were business people who were like, we need an entertainment venue up here. And they dialed it in and figured it out. And of course they had like probably very inexpensive land, and the building is purpose built for a dinner theater, but it's just a steel building. But they, it's really nice inside, and and they run that thing like a machine, and and they spend as much time focusing on the food experience as they did on the theater experience.
And I think that's really important too. Of what Dave Clark, who's head of Candlelight up there, and it's been going on, I guess, for about. Let me double check what season they're on. I think they're on this is season 16 currently.
Okay.
So they've been going for a little while up in Johnstown. And Dave Clark, he's not a theater person. He came from the construction world, actually, in fact. And so he really is intentionally modeling it about those business practices are key to him. He was like, he has a saying, a great product sells great. And that's what our goal is. We've struggled like everybody else, but it's always been my goal to make great productions and continue to improve the production value each year as we go along, and just really investing in shows that people actually want to come and see.
Right. Yeah. I eventually they're going to run into I'm sure they're already running into like, there's only so many musicals that, that people know, which is really what their sweet spot is doing things that people are familiar with. And, they're not going to be doing like Chicago avant-garde, theater in there, which is fine. But, so they'll repeat some shows and come back around, and they'll still, they sell the shit out of them up there. So they're doing great,
And in, well as BDT Stage and just continuing the comparison closed down this year, Candlelight is currently working on expansions, actually, at the moment. They're going to be expanding they have 2 different theaters coming up. There's going to be a 900-seat theater in Thornton and an 800-seat proscenium theater in Fort Collins. It's going to be opening in 2015 to just continue to expand the Candlelight brand. And Jalen Webb, who is their marketing person over there, I was talking a little bit about the strategic development there. Each of these different spaces is going to kind of cater to a different audience. So it's not all going to be musicals. It seems like they're kind of intentionally expanding their range on the Front Range.
Yeah, it's always great to hear of theater expanding rather than contracting. So in 2025, a new venue in Fort Collins, and then is the one in Thornton 2025 as well?
One in 2025, I was not able to get a date for. I'm not sure when they're targeting opening. Right now, that one is the most recently announced, and so still in kind of development stage.
Okay. So, when we think about the BDT Stage and Candlelight, those are kind of like 2 tentpole, like real traditional purpose-built dinner theaters. But, there's some other ones, like there's some little ones, like, we're thinking about, we've talked about the Adams Mystery Playhouse in Denver is basically a dinner theater. It's a much smaller type of thing. But, also, the Catamounts, which is, a theater company that does, some traditional plays, but they also do this series Feed, which is essentially like, it's very different from a typical dinner theater. It's more like a 4 or 5 course thing with not like a I don't know, regular like 2-act play or something like that. It's more of like an immersive performance of where actors are kind of in between the tables. It's very small, like maybe 20 guests or something like that. But they've done pretty well with that. I'm assuming so, because they keep rolling out new versions of it. So, and another model is like Glenwood Vaudeville, which is they have their own space, but it's different in that you can go in and you can just watch the show, or you can buy food if you want. It's not the whole wrapped together experience where you're going to have dinner and things like that. So there's still demand. It's nice to be able to sit there and and sit there and I don't know, nurse your pot roast or whatever it is, and an intermission is intermission is dessert time, which I found out with my granddaughters. The first show I ever took them to, I think it was Little Mermaid at Boulder Dinner Theater. And the next show I took them to at intermission, they were like, "Where's the ice cream?" Because they thought that was like what you got at theater at intermission. That was just the way it was done. And then I was like, that really, maybe that should be the thing. Everybody gets ice cream at intermission.
I mean, Kate Valley, who's artistic director of at Candlelight, she really is like, people just love experiences. Anything that you can do to make it more tangible, get people in the door, make it more of an experience. So hey, maybe ice cream is part of that experience.
Yeah. I know. It's like my wife is always, her opinion is that any sort of thing that you do with friends or family, or we take our grandkids out, it's like can always be enhanced by stopping for a cup of hot chocolate or something like that, to round it off. So, but yeah, and you kind of think of like kids really love dinner theater, and and there's definitely a lot of older folks like to go to that as well. But there's I know you like it. My son Andy, who's 22, loves dinner theater. He thinks it's the best thing to go to. So hopefully, these things will. Oh, I meant to ask. So those new theaters that Candlelight are doing, are those dinner theaters? Or
I believe so. I believe they're going to continue that in spirit, but I'm not 100% sure about that.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm sure we'll find that out eventually. So, anything
Absolutely.
else we can say So, there was one other. This is kind of a one-off, I think. But in Longmont, the Boulder Opera is doing a dinner opera at the Longmont Dickens Opera House.
I saw that.
Yeah. So I imagine they'll find out and see how that does. The opera is called Soir Angelica. I'm not sure what it's all about, but there are definitely some theaters that will occasionally do experiments. Like we'll have food along with the show and see how it goes. So.
Yeah, one of the reasons I love dinner theater is it just makes the evening so much more of an event. I mean, most of the time when you're going out to a show with people and friends or family and things like that, you're going to do some dinner beforehand or something anyway. Right. So it just all keeps it in the same place and just keeps the good vibes going for even longer in the building. Although, some people say that's the big problem with it, is it just takes a little bit too long. And right. With our society shortening attention spans, can people really sit down for 5 hours anymore and just have the meal and the show? I think they can. I have done it. I do it all the time. I love it. But I guess that is an open question.
Yeah. Yeah. And, another thing, and I do think people are going to start coming back around to those kinds of experiences as we, as we see people getting sick and tired of just sitting and staring at screens and things like that. Dinner theater, not only, if you're just going with a couple, you might be seated at a table with another couple of people, and you might actually meet some new people and talk to actual human beings sitting across the table from you. So there's something to be said for that.
That's probably my favorite part of the whole experience. I love talking to people about just talking to the people, because they're all theater lovers who are there. So it's like, these are the best people to talk to if you love theater and you love art. So
yep. All right. Well, on that note, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will take a whip around the state and look at all the live theater coming up as we kind of round the corner into the second part of February already. We'll be right back. The OnStage Colorado podcast is supported by Town Hall Arts Center, whose production of Urinetown runs January 26th through February 25th. The 3-time Tony Award-winning musical comedy is set in a collapsing urban metropolis where a 20-year drought has led to a government-enforced ban on private toilets. The citizens must use public amenities owned and operated by an evil corporation that profits by charging admission to the most popular seat in the house, so to speak. A hero will rise, a revolution will be sparked, and an unlikely love story will unfold. Get tickets at townhallartcenter.org. OnStage Colorado also receives support from the Aurora Fox Art Center, now presenting the comedy Art. In this fast-paced, biting comedy, longtime friendships are put to the test when an expensive white painting upends everyone's prior assumptions. Life choices are thrust to the forefront when criticism of the prized possession devolves into personal attacks and the airing of grievances. For tickets and info, go to aurorafoxartcenter.org. OnStage Colorado is also supported by the Boulder Ensemble Theater Company, Betsy, with several shows upcoming, including the kids' improv show, Mad Librarians, in Denver and Boulder, the Kingpenny Golden Radio Hour, also in Denver and Boulder, and if you missed What the Constitution Means to Me in Denver, it'll be back in Boulder at the Dairy Arts Center in May. Find tickets and information at betsy.org. All right, welcome back to the OnStage Colorado podcast. I'm Alex Miller, and I'm here with Toni Tresca, and it's time for our famous weekly peek into some of the shows you can see on stage right now around Colorado. So speaking of Candlelight, Crazy for You just opened there, and our reviewer, Carrie Redmond, will see that, but I think you just saw it, didn't you, Toni?
I did. I was there on Valentine's Day. I was there I had some amazing dates with me there, and we had a great time. Crazy for You, it's through April 7th. I'd never seen it before. It's a big tap musical directed by Steve Wilson, who is a freelance director, Colorado Theater Guild board member, and it's just a lot of fun. It's a lot of mistaken identities set in the 1930s. This banker is coming to close down a theater, and so. But along the way, obviously, love wins, and it's a great time. If you like dancing and you like big spectacle musicals, I really can't think of a show right now that's running that you're going to have more fun with, because it's just banger after elaborate tap number for about 2.5 hours.
All right. Yeah, that definitely sounds like right up the musical theater lovers lane. So on the other end of the spectrum is Space Explorers The Infinite through May 5th now. So this is a production of Denver Center's Off Center, and it's being staged in the Stanley Marketplace in Aurora there. And so it's really not a theater experience so much as it's a little more like almost like a theme park I wouldn't say ride, but a theme park sort of thing where it's a VR experience. So, and the whole thing is based on the International Space Station, and you wear VR headsets and you're there. And it's pretty cool. You know, you have like an avatar body. You can hold up your hands in front of you and it looks like some, and you see like your companions are avatars with different colors. And so you're walking into this dark space. And at first it's pretty disorienting, as you try and figure it out, especially if you're not used to VR, which I've only dabbled in it.
I had only done VR at the Denver Center for Theater of the Mind.
Oh, wow.
That was the first time I had done any of this VR, and this experience, the Space Explorers, The Infinite, was my second time. So I absolutely ditto on the taking a second to kind of get used to the technology. But once you kind of get into it, it really is, not to sound hyperbolic, but it does really feel like you're being transported to another world when you kind of step into those scenes. The views that they're able to capture with those by using the VR cameras is really exceptional.
Yeah, and so what it looks like is at first you're kind of, in my review, I describe it as almost like a blueprint of the space station. You kind of see the outline, and you can actually walk through the walls. And then you'll come across these orbs, and you touch them with your virtual hand, and all of a sudden you're kind of open this new chapter, and you might be in a room full of the crew members of the ISS having a meal, and you're like the fly on the wall, and it's this really high res video, and then the next one you can touch, you're outside watching a spacewalk, and the Earth is there below you, and it's a super neat experience. I think it's good for kids from 8 up or so. It's definitely it'd be a little challenging for kids younger than that to kind of figure it out. But and also the wonderful thing about it also is it's almost like dinner theater. There's so many great places to eat and have a drink and look around at the Stanley Marketplace, which, man, that place is bustling. It is really fun to go to if you haven't been.
It really is. I mean, hey, maybe that's a model for like theaters in the future. It's just like making use of those multi-purpose spaces that have all those like shops and food stuff already built in to just like make it more of an event.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely a feature to have all that around there. So Space Explorers the Infinite through May 5th. I saw Art at the Aurora Fox, and that is running through February 25th, so another week or so. And that's in their black box space. And so it was great. I mean, it's a funny show. I'd never seen it before, but it's got 3 really great actors in it. It's got Andrew Eulenhop, Gareth Sachs, and then the third one is Matthew Schneck, who I always remember from One Man, Two Governors. And so the 3 of them together, it's they're just, man, that is a lot of talent on one stage, and really, really great job there. So definitely go check out Art if you can. Also running, this run was extended. The Improvised Shakespeare Company at the Garner Galleria there at the Denver Center. Their run is extended through April 28th. This is they do it six nights a week. They make up a play on the spot that's kind of Shakespearean, and we just spoke to one of the founders yesterday, and so he'll be on the podcast next week.
Yeah, they literally just take a name and then from the audience, and then they run from there and create an entirely improvised Shakespeare experience that will just leave you with your jaw on the ground, because not only is it impressive that they're able to tell a complete story like that, they're using iambic pentameter, and they're making all these like Shakespearean references mixed in with like pop culture references.
Yep.
So it's in the Garner Galleria, which is a great little theater over at the Denver Center, and a fun spot to like grab a drink and watch a show.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think the tickets are pretty reasonable. I think they're like maybe $55 or something like that. And so definitely check out the podcast next week when we talk to Blaine about how they started and how it works, and even some of their favorite people just shout out suggested titles. And what was the one he said? It was like Rocky Hamlet.
Rocky Horror Hamlet show.
Okay, so you can imagine that was a pretty ripe vein that they opened up there, but they whatever gets tossed out, they just pick one and they run with it. So lots of fun. Also this week on Wednesday, this is just once a month thing at the Boulder Ensemble Theater Company is doing something called the Kingpenny Golden Radio Show. And it's, it's like it sounds. It's like an old-timey radio show from the 30s where they've got like the Foley guy with all his little sound effects and doors slamming and stuff like that. And then, 4 or 5 players who are, and sort of similar to what we were just talking about, where they take suggestions from the audience on slips of paper and they come up with some sort of a story that they act out. And it was pretty good. It had and you and I spoke about this because you saw the first one. I saw the second one, and they had a poet who kind of came in 3 times throughout the show and read poetry, which I found a little jarring. I thought she was good, but I wasn't sure that that was what I wanted to see. There, it didn't seem like it fit.
Yeah, I brought a friend to the experience, and they said something very, very similar afterwards, and they told me they were just like, I like the improv, but they're like, I have been thinking about the poets in between, because they're just like, I've been haunted by them. It's like it just felt so out of place in terms of it, and so poetry was it's very well done, but when you're in the mood for improv comedy, it certainly is a departure.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is, I think their second one. I'm sure they're going to be fine tuning it and seeing what people like and all that. But yeah, very well done. And really the vibe was fun because, at the Savoy where it was being staged this time, it'll be in some other places as well. But the Savoy is a great place for it because it was kind of like the speakeasy vibe. And a lot of people were dressed up with their kind of speakeasy clothes from the 30s. And it was a pretty lively crowd and pretty full too. So.
Yeah. And in addition, they've also got shows going on over at the Chaos Bloom in addition to their partnership with Betsy, which is pretty unique. So they've got shows Savoy. They're going to be coming to the Boulder area. They've got some and whatnot, and then also they've got a permanent home at Chaos Bloom in Denver, which is this cool little comedy club. So
right. So I guess I didn't really dive into it because I haven't written this review yet. So Kingpenny is like an independent troupe of sorts that plays in different places, and Betsy's just one of them.
That's right.
Is sponsoring them. And I think I noticed some of the actors were also in this Mad Librarians show that Betsy's doing. We'll talk about that in just a sec. So also at the Denver Center, Cebollas is running through March 17th. You had kind of mixed feelings about that one, and we talked about that. Did we talk about that last time? I think we did.
We did, yeah.
And then last night we were at Rubicon, which is the second of the world premieres at the Denver Center, stemming from the New Play Summits from years past. And so this one was about based on a true story about a woman who is a spy, who kind of, and it's not just like a page out of her story. It's like her whole story from when she first becomes, a spy to when she is no longer a spy. And, the first act, as we were talking last night, it's a lot of expository. It's a lot of really fast scenes. It kind of felt like it bit off a little bit more than it needed to chew. Like, did we need to know all of that backstory? But the second act, I thought, kind of pulled it together and kind of focused, a little more on some, one particular caper, I guess you would say. And there's a lot of also kind of like, I don't know, political intrigue and double dealing and stuff like that. There's a lot of sex. There's no nudity, but there's some pretty heavy panting sex scenes. And a lot of use of the, so this is staged in the Killstrom Theater, which is in the round and has this really amazing stage that has all kinds of trapdoors and things, that set pieces that pop up. And so they made ample use of that. Chris Coleman, the director, and overall a pretty good show. It was definitely a different kind of show that I've seen in a while.
Yeah, and I think another one of the unique elements for the show was also that it's a drama that uses a lot of multicasting.
Yeah.
So like it's 5 actors, but besides Caroline Holding, who plays Betty, all the other 4 actors are basically like troupe members, and they are just like playing a variety of characters, which is really interesting to actually see executed in a dramatic form, because I'm so accustomed to seeing that in more of a comedic setting.
Right.
I thought it worked most of the time, particularly due to the costuming by Megan Anderson Doyle, who really helped communicate who these characters were. But there are a couple moments here and there where it was like,
one of the ensemble members was a rather petite woman who they had play also some male roles, and that didn't always read to me. She had like a kind of a bad mustache stuck on at one point, and I don't know. What did you think of her?
That was what I was referring to. Is I was like, some of those, like when she's playing the senator, it does feel like SNL level jokey, but it doesn't make any sense given the serious stakes of the rest of the scene. But it does feel like a little bit SNL-y in those moments, and yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, she plays the main character's mom at one point, and another woman. I was trying to think of like how else would you cast that? I'm not sure. Rather than having 2, a 5th or 6th character in there. So, but anyway, definitely a cool show and a world premiere, and it's always wonderful to see shows in the Killstrom there. I love that. That's not a bad seat in the house kind of space. So. Running on the other end of things in the kids theater realm, we were just talking about Betsy. They have this show called Mad Librarians that's playing into May at a couple of different places in Boulder and Denver. Our reviewer Jamisha saw it at the Savoy. And it's basically the premise is, and if you look at our review, her review on our site, I added there, they have a little trailer that Ray Bailey did that really shows what it is. But basically it's the taking suggestions from the kids, but in Mad Libs format. So imagine you're playing Mad Libs and you have some ridiculous noun, and it's all of a sudden the actors are on stage, or okay, I'm a yellow hippopotamus, and so it looked like an awful lot of fun. So, and I think this is Betsy's first kids show, or at least under the new management. I'm not sure. So that'll be coming around. Your thumbs up. So this is the first time Betsy's done a kids show
under the new management.
Okay.
I'm not sure about Stephen and Rebecca if they have done any stuff, but.
Also playing at the Denver Center at the Big Buell Theater, a touring Broadway show, Message in a Bottle, which plays through February 25th. This is really a dance show set to Sting music, and you saw this one, right?
I did not see this one, but I interviewed Kate Prince, who is choreographer director, and she kind of talked a little bit about how the show is really designed for people who maybe don't like musical theater, or maybe that's not their jam. And so it's really leaning. It's a show about the refugee crisis, set to Sting music. It's not being sung live by the actors. You're hearing Sting sing and then seeing them dance the story out. And I've talked to a couple people who have seen it. They say it's really cool. So I'm not a huge Sting or the Police fan. So maybe it's not necessarily for me. But people who are fans of that music seem to really dig it.
Yeah, our reviewer Eric Fitzgerald saw it and seemed to really enjoy it as well. So that review is up on our site. Also playing, starting up is at the Arvada Center is Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet of 1812. And so we'll have a review of that from our reviewer Alice, and that's running through March 31st. And I think you know a little bit about this one, right?
I do. It's based off of War and Peace. It's a Tony Award winning musical by Rachel Chafkin, who helped it. She did Hadestown of that world and whatnot. And so it's a stripped down musical version of it. David Nels is doing the orchestration. It's kind of like a funky hyper pop take on this setting. I'm going to be seeing it this afternoon, so I'll let you know how it is.
All right. Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing what people think of it. It's one of those titles that's sort of intriguing. Also playing down in the Colorado Springs at the Fine Arts Center at Colorado College is Water by the Spoonful. And this is our reviewer April, I think, saw this last night, so we'll have a review of that. It's a, quote, heartfelt meditation about lives on the brink of redemption. So that runs through March 3rd. Coming up at Wonderbound, one of our favorite contemporary dance studios, is Awakening Beauty, and I know you and I will be at the sort of the preview night next this coming Wednesday, and that runs through March 3rd. Always cool stuff there at Wonderbound.
And I believe they are close, if not already sold out for that run. So if you are wanting to go, if you're wanting to go see that show, you'd better get your hands on the tickets. It's a world premiere of their new take on Sleeping Beauty. So
great. All right. Also, at Vintage, the Legend of Georgia McBride is running through March 24th. We'll have a review of that from Eric. And I looked at this. It's got something to do with drag and Elvis, I recall.
That's right. It's a Elvis. You got everything right. It's an Elvis impersonator he gets fired from his job. And so in order to make a living, he becomes a drag queen. And so has to kind of learn that world, because that's what the former establishment kind of gets replaced with, is this drag bar. And so rather than be out of a job, he switches from impersonating Elvis to doing drag.
Yeah, gotta roll with the times.
Yep.
So I'm sure that sounds like a lot of fun. Over at Benchmark in Lakewood, they're opening a show called You Got Older on February 23rd to run through March 16th. And this one is a darkly comic new play about family, illness, and cowboys is what I've got. But have you talked to anybody about this one yet?
I know it's Neil Trugolo, who's directing, who's hot off Blasted, and he's reteaming with Amelia Morris for intimacy direction over there. But I don't know a ton more about this play. I know it's a pretty new production, and sounds interesting.
Yeah. And then coming up, well, this is probably going to be this is tomorrow, but One Night Stand Theater is doing a show called Date Night on the 18th, and Erica's going to go to that. So even though it's only a one night stand, we haven't actually covered One Night Stand Theater yet. So I'm happy that we'll have some idea of what it's all about. So I think they solicited some short plays from having to do with dates or something like that. So, all right. Also on stage now or opening soon, The Good Doctor, way down in Trinidad. Main Street Live is doing this. It's a Neil Simon thing that's takes some of Chekhov's works and remakes them somehow, and that's running through February 25th. At Bob Blue up in Fort Collins, The Open House, which is a Will Eno play, and I think Carrie, our reviewer, is going to get to that one. That runs through March 10th. Again, way down south in Durango at Fort Lewis College, they're doing The Wolves from February 23rd through March 2nd. Have you ever seen that one, Tony?
I have. It's a great play.
It is.
It's about the women's soccer team, and you're literally watching them play soccer and discuss life on stage.
Yeah. I saw it at Betsy a few years ago. They did it. Yeah, in sort of the black box theater at the Dairy there. Great show. Another show that's often being done, Picasso at the La Panagile, and that is at Stage Door in Conifer, and it runs through February 25th. This is a show I wish I could get up to. I'm not sure I can make it. Endgame at Thunder River Theater in Carbondale, and this is a Beckett play. I think two of the characters are in trash cans. It's just one of these kind of famous Beckett plays, and it's got BLF Brian Landis Filkins and my old friend Bob Moore in it. And if I can possibly make it up there, I'll try. But yeah, if you're up skiing and you can hop over to Carbondale, check that out. This is another one-off, but I was going to mention it because it's kind of interesting. If you like Gilbert and Sullivan, there's a kind of a at Lone Tree Arts Center on February 24th. It's called Pirates of Penzance, Gilbert and Sullivan's Greatest Hits. So it's not like I guess the full staging. It's just a lot of the music. If you like GNS, which a lot of people do. At Coal Creek Theater in Louisville, they're doing Charlie's Aunt. This is a farce, and it runs through March 9th. And that's what I had on my list, Tony. I know that's not everything, but have you got any additions there?
Yeah, sure. I'll just shout out one more. It's upcoming. It's going to be in Lafayette. It's opening next weekend. It's on the 20th, or actually, it's going to opening in March. It's got pushed back because of COVID. Excuse me. But it's called Snakes. And it's this spoof in the same vein of something like Sharknado about what happens if these explorers get caught and surrounded by this like massive snake that's going to eat them. Personally, this sounds absolutely terrifying to me. I hate snakes. I don't know if I will actually be able to stomach sitting and watching this show, even though it is a comedy. But I am going to be going to talk to the cast and crew about the making of the show, because I was like, I gotta see how realistic this snake is. I'm like, they freak me out, man.
The poster art they have for it is hilarious. It's got the cast with this big snake in the background, and you definitely shouldn't read. Killers of the Flower Moon was the same author that wrote this book called The Lost City of Z, which I read, which is a true account of these people exploring this missing down in like El Salvador, one of these places where they found all these, using this new technology to find all these ruins and stuff. And the place was so filled with poisonous snakes that they wear these snake garters, which are these like,
oh my God,
like Kevlar, like things that go around your legs, because everybody can get bitten by snakes down there like crazy.
Oh my God, that sounds terrible. Why would you put this in my mind?
It's so funny. I grew up as a boy, with garter snakes and stuff, and I don't see what the big deal is. But my wife Jen is the same way. I mean, there was a couple of years ago, there was a snake. It was a little bigger than a worm, and I swear she jumped like straight 10 feet up in the air vertically. I was like, what the heck? Anyway, that's so snakes. Yeah, definitely check that one out. I think Eric will be at that, so we'll have a review of that when it comes around. So I was going to mention that the Colorado New Play Summit is coming up this weekend, so we will both be there. This is the annual New Play Festival at the Denver Center, where a lot of their new shows come from. So this is your opportunity to hear them first in readings form, and usually that's just the start. The playwrights will take some of what they hear at the festival, and they'll rework them and workshop them, and and the Denver Center will choose. I think they always choose at least one, but I don't know. But so one or two, and so it's really fun. It's if you haven't been to a reading or this is like a whole thing. There's like a dinner, and there's like there's going to some of the new shows is part of the deal, and you get to hobnob. The playwrights are there, and a lot of the Denver Center folks, and it's an awful lot of fun.
Yeah, if you're interested in reading a little bit more about the playwrights and kind of how they got to the summit, I have a piece coming out for Westward next week that's got interviews with all of the playwrights of the 4 plays who are going to be in attendance at the summit. And if you are going to be at the summit, don't be afraid to come up and say hello to Alex and I. We'd love to meet you out in the wild at the theater. So,
yeah, I'll be wearing my OnStage Colorado one-piece zip-up jumpsuit, so you'll be able to see me there. I don't know. I keep thinking maybe I should get a name tag or something someday. So
If it's like last year, the DCPA handed out name tags to everybody.
That's right.
So
yeah.
I'm like, fingers crossed. Maybe you'll see our name tags and whatnot.
Yeah. So all right. Well, that's it for this part. Stand by. We're going to have my interview with Josh Blanchard from Colorado Creative Industries in just a sec. So hang on. All right. Well, we're here today with Josh Blanchard, the president of Colorado Creative Industries. Thanks for being on the podcast today, Josh.
Thank you, Alex. Glad to be here. And just to clarify, I serve as the director of Colorado Creative Industries. We do have an advisory board chair, who we may refer to as president. But glad to be here.
Yeah. So, director, so CCI is a division of the Colorado Office of Economic Development and International Trade. I was doing some of my homework beforehand.
Yes.
So, it's a Colorado governmental agency that you recently became the director of. So that was just last fall?
Last September. And you're right, it is a mouthful. We often refer to our division as OEDIT, Office of Economic Development and International Trade, which sits within the governor's office. And CCI, of course, serves as the state of Colorado's art agency. And so, it's interesting that we are uniquely positioned within the Office of Economic Development here in Colorado. So, it's been a whirlwind, very exciting, interesting, inspiring 4 months.
I bet. So, you and I go way back. I knew you when you first moved to Summit County with your husband Chris.
We do.
And so you and Chris took over the Lake Dillon Theater Company back in the day, which is now Theater Silco and Silverthorne, and you still live up in Summit County. So I imagine that means you're doing a little bit of commuting these days, huh?
I am. So I'm commuting back and forth up from the high country, and it's been great. I'm usually in Denver 3 or 4 days a week. But because this is, of course, a statewide agency, or we serve the entire state, I've had an opportunity to get out all around the state, and so it's been really good.
That's great. Well, hopefully you're able to go on the the reverse of ski traffic and all that as part of your commute.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I wanted to just back up a little bit. I know you're a little new to it, but I'm sure you know the answer to these questions. What is Colorado Creative Industries? How was it started, and how is it funded?
Sure. So Colorado Creative Industries, as I shared, is the state's arts agency. All 50 states, as well as the territories in the United States, has a designated arts agency, which really serves in many capacities. Of course, we directly serve the citizens of Colorado, but we also serve as that conduit for the National Endowment for the Arts. About 60% of their funding is actually designated to state agencies in partnership with federal programs related to the arts. The other 40% are direct support to individual nonprofits and artists and things of that nature. But we serve as that conduit between that federal agency and then, the different organizations and municipalities and programs throughout the state of Colorado. So with that in mind, we wear many different hats, many different functions. First of all, we ensure that some of those federal programs that some of those dollars support are carried out in the state of Colorado. So one of those programs is the National Poetry Out Loud program, which is really a literary program for any student in the United States to participate. And so we have a great Poetry Out Loud program here in Colorado. There's other programs as well. And then in addition to that, we in Colorado can then take some of those funds, match those funds dollar for dollar, and then provide those funds as investments directly to nonprofits. We can work with other agencies to sort of support the programs that we have or the initiatives that we have. Some examples include our arts and society programs, which really look at how arts serve as a conduit to meet community needs, whether that's addressing behavioral and mental health issues, or serving our veteran population, or looking how the arts play specific roles in our aging population or in our youth. So we can support those programs. We have other, of course, programs that we can invest in, like our Creative District programs or the Colorado Creates Grants program. And so any of those funds are matched dollar for dollar from the NEA. So we are funded largely through gaming tax revenue here in the state of Colorado. Our budget is roughly $2 million a year. And then we receive, like I said, a matching grant from the NEA of just under $1 million. So that brings our total annual budget to just under $3 million. And, we stretched that over 16 different programs. We're a small but mighty staff of 6. And again, we're doing the work, on behalf of the state in service to the people.
All right, that's great. I love that it's being funded in partly by gaming revenue. It's kind of like the Great Outdoors Colorado is funded by the lottery proceeds.
Yeah, being in a Tabor state, it's important that we can I think it's important that we keep our eye on the goals, the larger goals in service, to the citizens, and of course our tourist population as well, our seasonal residents. But of course, we have to do that in fiscally responsible ways. And so we're funded. That's the mechanism through which the arts are funded in the state.
So for an arts organization looking to get funding, I'm assuming this is just sort of a grant. They write a grant request or something like that and submit it, and then there's a selection process. But I want to ask, what should arts organizations know about getting some of those funds? Like, who's eligible? Is it more geared towards rural or urban or both, or what? If you're the director of a little theater somewhere, what might you want to know about CCI?
Absolutely. That was actually my first introduction into CCI, was writing for the Colorado Creates grant, which is really the nonprofit assistance grant, operational grants for the nonprofit arts organizations throughout the state. So that's the first thing I would encourage nonprofit arts organizations to do. First of all, that is one of the requirements. That the application be from an arts-focused 501c3 organization, or it could be an independent component of a program that's associated from a unit of government. Could be a college, could be a university, but that program's primary focus is on an arts initiative. So most of those Colorado Create Grants recipients are nonprofit arts organizations. And the amount is based on, or the funding amount is based on the annual operating revenue or operating budget of the organization's fiscal year. So those grants range from $4,000 up to $10,000. And those grants, the grant periods usually open in the summer. And again, any nonprofit that's been in operation for 5 years is eligible to, apply. You have to have a history of course, doing good programs with impacts around in your community. And there's information, of course, on the website about when specifically folks can apply for funding. It's actually a 2-year revolving grant. So if your nonprofit is awarded in year 1, then they're essentially eligible for year 2. And then for year 3, organizations will sit out before they can reapply for essentially what would be a start over year 1. And that's really the largest investment of the CCI's funding goes back to these, to our partner nonprofits throughout the state.
Right. And then you have some of these other big programs that you referenced. So like Colorado Creative Districts, and there's another one called Space to Create. What are those two?
Sure. So Colorado Creative Districts is the state certified creative district program here in Colorado. And it's really where organizations within specific communities define a creative district, meaning that's where there is a significant creative sector in their communities. Typically, what it looks like is it might be in a downtown area. It could be in conjunction with a historic preservation area, but it is a standalone program. And it provides the Colorado Creative Districting grant program or certification program provides technical support, some grant dollars as well to really help organizations or communities, municipalities pull together their resources, right? Leverage their resources between individual nonprofits, the small business community, perhaps a larger business community, the local jurisdiction, perhaps an economic development district or community development district, to really focus on strategies that use the creative sector as a driver for economic development. So that's, creating jobs, and especially in a state like Colorado that many communities rely on tourism, or Summit County is one, allows, really some focused strategic work around the creative sector as an economic driver. In Colorado, we have just about 30 creative districts that have gone through the certified creative district program. They are all over the state. They're in metro areas. There are creative districts in rural areas, mountain resort communities. And they really have had, every one of them is a little unique, and they've really been transformative within their communities as far as really providing some stability for their creative sector, for those nonprofits that are involved, individual artists that are in residence there, and have served in many ways as economic drivers for those communities.
Yeah, it's really impactful what an arts district or just like one, really impactful arts, it could be a theater or a performing arts center or something like that can really drive investment. And you don't have to look very far past your door, because the Theater Silco is like, oh my God, Silverthorne has just been transformed since that came in. And, it wasn't all because of the theater, but I think it was a real kind of catalyst for it.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's exactly right. The arts can certainly serve as a catalyst for economic development. And it isn't, of course, just within the creative sector, right? It certainly supports food and beverage as more restaurants and coffee shops and, breakfast places open up, and of course shopping, retail, small retail, larger retail. And so it can really attract diverse different businesses and economic opportunities for communities. Yeah.
It's hard not to, when I go through Silverthorne these days, it's like they're building all these big hotels and all these apartments. And, my family moved to Silverthorne in 1980 when there was the old Dillon Inn and the Mint and the Save 'Em at gas station, and that was about it.
That was about it. Well, and when I moved up here in 2002, there wasn't much more than that. I think the outlets had been there, and rec centers there, but you're absolutely right. Over the last 8 years or so, since town of Silverthorne has, of course, focused on the arts as one of their key concepts. We've, again, I'm not speaking as CCI director. I'm speaking as a resident here in Colorado and Silverthorne. But you certainly can see very tangibly how that can affect communities. Yeah.
Can you point to another example of where CCI funding has been that catalyst in another town?
Sure. You mentioned Space to Create earlier, so I'll take a moment to talk a little bit about the Space to Create initiative. So as we know, one of the biggest challenges for folks to live and thrive in the state of Colorado is affordable housing and sustainable housing, really dignified housing, right? And so my predecessor, Margaret Hunt, recognized nearly a decade ago that one of the biggest barriers for the creative sector and the creative workforce is to have sustainable housing as well as commercial makerspace. Those art studios, dance studios, places where artists can actually do their work, because you can't always, do your work in your bedroom or your sunroom or whatever you may have. So really designated spaces, makerspace and creative space. So Space to Create Colorado really was the initial seed to start assisting communities with the development of affordable live, work, and commercial spaces. And so this program is really unique. It is really the nation's first state-led initiative for affordable housing within the creative sector. And it was launched, the first Space to Create program was launched in 2015 in Trinidad. And so that's one of the communities that has been remarkably transformed with the creative sector. City of Trinidad has a Space to Create program there. There are workforce housing units that are eligible. If you work in the creative sector, you can live in these affordable units. There's makerspace there. And then the city of Trinidad is also a creative district. And so if your listeners have visited Trinidad, then that, the downtown area, there's lots of great, museums, galleries, creative spaces that really elevate your experience when you're visiting Trinidad. And then for the residents who live there, it really just enhances their quality of life and gives them access to a variety of what the creative sector has to offer.
Yeah, that's great. That is such a key part of it, especially if you're going to bring in, talent from out of town, like a lot of theaters do. It's great to have that. And are those typically, master leases, or is it rental assistance, or how are they doing this for workforce housing?
Sure. So in Trinidad, there is the developer is a company called ArtSpace, and they serve as the developer. They have property management there. So it is, of course, rentals, and so folks can access those deed restricted workforce units through the property management there. But everyone is a little bit different. Each one of these Space to Create projects are a little bit different. And currently there's about 6 throughout the state that are underway or in some phase of the Space to Create process. So Trinidad and Ridgeway both have completed Space to Create programs. There are Space to Create programs in development in Grand Lake, Salida, and Carbondale. And then Grand Junction is also has a project. Their Grand Terminal project is another example. And so, just look, if you were to look at the map across, Colorado, across the West, you see, really all over in diverse communities where these Space to Create, projects are there. CCI helps by providing an initial technical assistance grant, whether that's for feasibility work or economic development work. And then we are in partnership with Fetcher Foundation and History Colorado and Gates Foundation also to help leverage funds for these programs as well. So one of the, I think, success stories for CCI is really stretching that dollar, right? Our budget for the state of Colorado, our budget represents 46th in the nation in terms of public investment in the arts. And so we are constantly working with, diverse partners and stakeholders to help, stretch that dollar a little bit more and have more meaningful impacts across the state through our programs. And again, Space to Create is just another good example of, what these dollars do for communities, for the folks who live there and work there, but also for all of us who like to get out, especially during the summer, but all year, get out and visit these communities and see what the state has to offer.
Yeah, it's great. Well, I was going to mention that. So you mentioned Colorado's in 46th place, which is pretty sad at the bottom of the pile there.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. And so the Colorado Sun just had a story recently about this, and you were interviewed in it, and I just wanted to ask. So they referenced the fact that Governor Polis is trying to advance some more funding that the legislature still has to approve, but it would include like a $16 million tax credit for that creative workforce housing, and another $540,000 for those creative districts. And how do you feel about that? What would you do first if you got all that, assuming it all came through?
Sure. That's a great question. CCI, Colorado Creative Industries, has not seen an increase to our operational to our operations or to our programs in a decade or longer. And so part of it is really, I believe, advancing the investments that we currently have already in place, right? So that those grants, for example, the Colorado Creates grants, which are $4,000 to $10,000, those are meaningful, but they could be a lot more meaningful if we had additional funds. And so I think, right now, well, first of all, we're very excited that the governor recognizes the role that the arts play, not only for economic development within the communities, but also as it relates to livability and people's quality of life. Just what it means to be able to access the arts or arts programming means a lot for folks. And so it's exciting that this is even being considered for the first time in a decade. So I think, investing in those programs that have been successful and have shown results throughout the state, both in metro areas as well as rural areas. CCI right now is going through, like many agencies and many nonprofits, a strategic planning process. CCI's strategic plan currently is dated 2019 to 2023. And in our partnership with the NEA, the National Endowment for the Arts, state agencies are required to have up-to-date strategic or performance plans. And so we're due for a performance or strategic plan update. And through that process, I think as we're doing outreach, talking with our community partners, with our stakeholders across the state, creative district leaders, arts district leaders, recipients of our grants, we'll gain a sense of where we think that those increased funding dollars could go and where it would be the most impactful and the most meaningful. I do believe that as we think about some of the larger state goals around housing, around addressing concerns around mental health and behavioral health, childcare, we know is such a challenge for all workers around the state, but maybe especially in the creative sector where, folks who are working in the creative sector may not be working 9-to-5 jobs, right? And so, of course, looking at sustainability efforts and, what kinds of programs, how can the arts help address some of the sustainability issues or climate-related issues that, we're facing, especially in the West. So I think out of that strategic planning process, we're being thoughtful, we're being methodical. We'll be able to identify some really key areas that I think this increased public investment can go. So I think, stay tuned. We'll keep our fingers crossed through this legislative session. And we know, right, Alex, we know there's so many priorities that really need funding in a state in Colorado right now. And, people's pocketbooks are really feeling what's going on. And so we want to be as efficient and thoughtful as we can be with whatever public investment increases come our way.
Yeah, and it's something that sometimes it's a little hard to convince politicians to, they're happy to build aircraft carriers and spend any amount of money on that. But if you want $1,000 to, have a kid's book program at the library, it's like pulling teeth. So it is frustrating from that point of view. I know you're not a politician right now, so you don't want to opine on those things, but it is difficult. So it's great that Governor Polis is behind that, and I don't think they could ask for a better person in place. I mean, you were the kind of the money guy at the theater there for many years, and then you were a Summit County commissioner, so you got steeped in government, and now your path has led you here. So it just seems like does it feel like a pretty good fit for you?
It does. I so enjoyed my work running a nonprofit agency for a decade, and even before that, working in tourism at the ski within the ski resorts. But having that opportunity to look at the broader concerns in Summit County as it relates to sort of what we've been talking about, some of those livability concerns and sustainability concerns. And when this opportunity came about, it really is that nexus between how the creative sector really plays, I believe, a critical role in community sustainability and how individuals and communities really thrive. And so it does feel like a sweet spot. It really does feel that way. And I will share with you, I feel really blessed. And the creative community across the state, from Denver Metro to down to Colorado Springs and Pueblo and Trinidad, and in the West, everyone has just been very supportive and willing to visit with me and share their concerns and their ideas. And that's really where I'm at right now, is gaining a broader sense of what does the creative sector look like from a statewide bird's eye view. And it's been a blessing and lots of work to do. So yeah.
All right. Well, that's great. I'm sure you're going to be a very busy guy, but thanks so much for being on the OnStage Colorado podcast. Josh Blanchard, director of Colorado Creative Industries, is out there trying to rustle up some bucks for your arts organization. So if you see him, thank him. And thanks so much again for taking the time today, Josh.
Alex, thank you. And thanks for all you do for theater and the arts in the state as well. Thank you.
Okay. All right, that's it for this episode of the OnStage Colorado podcast. Thanks, Toni, for walking through all this stuff, and also for Josh Blanchard for taking time out of his busy schedule to talk about Colorado creative industries. Next week, we'll be back with the interview that we referenced earlier with Blaine Swen from the Improvised Shakespeare Company, and that was one that Toni and I, both of us wanted to do this interview, so we did it together, and had a lot of fun talking to Blaine about how they do these wacky shows off the cuff, and it's a lot of fun. So definitely come back for that. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the OnStage Colorado podcast wherever you get your audio stuff, and please give us a review or a couple of stars if you're enjoying the show, and share it with other people that who like theater. Our audience is growing, but I think a lot of people would love to know about this, just because it's easier to just kind of listen to this and find out what's going on than to go through all the different places to find theater information, unless of course I'm talking about our website, which is all there. So check out our website with all the latest reviews and news and other podcast episodes, and that full calendar at onstagecolorado.com. Toni, do you have something?
If you want to get in contact with us, you have a comment for the show, you want to share your opinion on a production that you've seen or something, or you just want to say hi, don't hesitate to reach out at info@onstagecolorado.com. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, and also we've got a commenting tool on the site, so it's really easy to pop on there and say, hey, I agree with this review, or you're crazy, and whatever. We'd love to hear feedback. We also hear from a lot of people on Facebook. A lot of people reach out to me through Facebook Messenger for some reason, which is always, I don't know. I always find that kind of a clunky tool because it's just got that tiny little window for for typing on. But yeah, however it works, there's multiple ways to get a hold of us. So anyway, well, Toni, let's not do the joint thing anymore. Let's just say say it separate, because it never seems to add up. So
sounds good.
All right. Well, I'm Alex Miller.
And I'm Toni Tresca.
And we'll both see you at the show.